They left 3 kids on my porch while I could barely stand. My name is Jodie, I'm 34, and for most of my life I confused being useful with being loved. I've worked as a certified nursing assistant for over a decade. I spend my shifts lifting other people's parents out of hospital beds, turning them so they don't develop sores, sitting with strangers in the last hours of their lives because nobody else showed up. At home, I was always the fixer, the one who absorbed whatever fell apart so everyone else didn't have to. The house I live in used to belong to my grandmother, Ruth. When she got sick, I moved in to care for her, not because anyone asked, but because that was simply who I was in this family. Ruth was the only person who ever really looked at me and waited to hear the honest answer when she asked how I was doing. When she passed 2 years ago, she left me the house. My mother called it favoritism. I called it the one time in my life someone had chosen me on purpose. For months before everything I'm about to tell you happened, my mother organized a family collection to finally replace the cheap temporary marker on Ruth's grave with a proper headstone. I gave $1,200, an enormous sum on my salary. My younger sister Dana contributed a smaller amount. My mother said she'd handle placing the order. I trusted her completely. Then my back gave out. A resident at the care facility started to fall, and I caught him before he hit the floor. Something in my lower spine tore with a bright, electric snap. The MRI showed 2 herniated discs. My doctor was blunt: no lifting over 10 pounds, no bending, no twisting, or I'd be looking at surgery by spring. He signed off on 2 weeks of strict rest. I spent the first 2 days on my couch, learning how to stand up without crying. On the morning of the 3rd day, my phone lit up with a text from my mother: "We have an emergency out of town. Watch the kids." I typed back immediately that I physically couldn't, that I was injured and under strict lifting restrictions. Before she even replied, I heard gravel crunching in my driveway. I dragged myself to the window in time to see my mother's SUV already backing out. On my porch stood 3 small figures: my oldest niece, 8, dragging a rolling suitcase, my nephew, 6, and my youngest niece, barely 3, sitting alone on the top step because nobody had told her where to go. My sister leaned out the passenger window as they pulled away. "They're good kids. Mom will explain. Love you." Then they were gone, leaving a booster seat tipped over on the lawn. A final text arrived a moment later: "Save the excuses. Family helps." I called immediately. It went straight to voicemail, the fast, single ring of a call being manually declined. I stood in my doorway, barely able to hold myself upright, looking at 3 children I had no physical ability to care for. My youngest niece raised both arms toward me, the universal signal for wanting to be picked up. A 30-pound toddler was 3 times my lifting limit. I had to tell a 3-year-old I couldn't hold her, and watch her small arms slowly drop as something in her face closed off. I lowered myself to the floor an inch at a time just to put a hand on her back instead. That first night was a disaster. Dinner was dry cereal because I couldn't stand at the stove long enough to cook. When my nephew knocked over a full cup of juice, I had to slide down the wall vertebra by vertebra just to wipe it up, pain squeezing my hip like a vice the whole way down. While unpacking my youngest niece's bag, I found a folded pink swimsuit and a bottle of children's sunscreen tucked at the bottom. You don't pack sunscreen for a family emergency. At dinner, the kids casually unraveled the whole story without meaning to. My nephew announced that Grandma had promised they'd go swimming. My niece added that it was just Grandma and Mommy going, the kids got to stay with me, and they weren't allowed to tell their father where they were. That last part turned my stomach cold. My sister and her ex-husband, Marcus, had split the year before, and for 2 months she'd been blocking his scheduled visits, always claiming the kids were sick or busy. Now there was a pink swimsuit on my table and an 8-year-old telling me to help hide her location from her own father. They hadn't dropped the kids off because of an emergency. They dropped them off so they could go on a trip without them, and used my body, mid-injury, as a free place to store their responsibilities. At 11 that night, sitting in the dark with my spine throbbing, I called Marcus. He answered on the first ring, his voice tired and careful. I told him where his kids were and why I couldn't properly care for them. There was a long silence, then a heavy exhale. "There's no emergency," he said. "She just didn't want me to have them for my scheduled weekend. She's been canceling on me for 2 months." "Where did she say she was going?" I told him honestly that I didn't know. He said he was coming to get his children in the morning. He arrived at 9. My nephew saw the truck and screamed with joy. All 3 kids ran for the door. My youngest niece threw her arms up at her father exactly the way she had at me, and this time she was lifted, effortless, safe. As he buckled them into their car seats, my niece called out from the back that Grandma had said they'd already be at the beach house by now. Marcus looked at me over the roof of his truck, nodded once, and drove away with his children. After they left, I texted my mother, "The kids are with Marcus." "Where are you?" The message showed as read instantly. No reply came for 3 days. I spent that silence doing something I'd never let myself do before, actually looking, methodically, at the pattern of my family's behavior instead of absorbing it and moving on. I scrolled back through old messages and found a group text from 4 months earlier, my sister proposing a beach trip, just the 3 of them, and then, weeks later, claiming they'd had to cancel because money was tight. I'd told her not to worry about it. They hadn't canceled the trip. They'd canceled me. I searched my email and found a resort reservation my sister had forwarded months before, for the exact dates I'd just spent feeding cereal to her children. The guest count on the confirmation read, "Party of 3. Then a friend from work sent me a screenshot, a mutual church acquaintance's public vacation photos, posted that same morning, showing my mother and sister at a resort pool, sun hats and drinks in hand, captioned "Girls Trip, living our best life." The post went up the exact morning my mother had texted me the word emergency. The same friend sent a second screenshot a minute later. My mother had submitted an urgent prayer request to our church's prayer chain, telling 40 members that our family was dealing with a sudden tragedy out of town, and asking for meals to be prepared for their return. They'd used a lie about tragedy to collect free dinners from an entire congregation. I found the last piece myself. Going through a box of my mother's old receipts while looking for paperwork on Ruth's headstone, I found a resort deposit slip. The date matched, almost to the day, the week I'd handed her $1,200 for the granite marker. My grandmother's grave still had a curling tin card pushed into the dirt. There had never been a headstone order. There had only ever been a beach trip, quietly funded with money I'd given in her memory. I didn't cry. What settled over me instead was something quieter and much more useful than grief. That Sunday, our church held a welcome home gathering for my mother and sister, casseroles, sweet tea, a banner wishing the family well after their tragedy. I went. I brought 4 printed pages in my purse, the original reservation, the deposit receipt dated against the headstone money, a screenshot of the prayer chain message, and my doctor's signed lifting restriction. My mother and sister walked in glowing with sunburn, carrying a fruit tray from the drive home, expecting hugs and sympathy. The room went quiet instead. People had already seen the vacation photos, and the math was starting to add up on its own. My mother felt the temperature drop and came straight at me instead, loudly accusing me of embarrassing the family, of calling Marcus behind her back, of airing private business in public. My sister backed her up, insisting they'd simply paid for a trip in advance and weren't going to waste it babysitting. The word landed hard in a room full of people who'd spent all week praying for a tragedy that never existed. I didn't raise my voice. I laid the 4 pages out on the table between the ham and the sweet tea, one at a time, and read each one aloud, the reservation with my name quietly removed, the prayer chain broadcast sent the morning they left, my medical restriction, and the deposit paid the same week I gave my mother money for a headstone that was never bought. I told the room my grandmother still had a tin marker in the dirt, because her headstone money had paid for a beach house instead. Then I told my mother, calmly, that she hadn't had an emergency. She'd had a reservation. Nobody moved. My mother tried one last time, her voice going soft and wounded, asking how I could do this to her, in church. I told her I hadn't done anything to her, I'd simply stopped lying for her, and that I was done being this family's spare set of hands. I picked up my papers and walked out. The cost came quickly. Rumors spread that I was bitter and jealous. An aunt called to scold me for embarrassing my mother in public. I was quietly dropped from the holiday list. But the truth changed something real, too. With the pattern of lies exposed, Marcus was able to secure full custody without further interference. A week later, he sent me a photo of all 3 kids safe on his couch. An envelope arrived a few days after that with a child's crayon drawing inside, 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, labeled simply, Aunt Jodie. A month later, my mother tried one final time, a late-night text claiming her back hurt and she had no one else to call. The old version of me would have already been in the car. Instead, I told her I hoped she felt better, and that I wasn't coming to fix it. I put the phone face down and felt something close to peace. I bought my grandmother's headstone myself, in solid gray granite, out of my own account. When it was installed, I sat beside it in the grass and told her I was finally getting there. My life got smaller after that, and infinitely better. One afternoon, my niece sat at my kitchen table anxiously wiping up a spilled cup before anyone could get upset about it, and I gently told her that cleaning up every mess wasn't her job, that she was allowed to just be 8 years old, and that she didn't have to earn being loved in this house. For 34 years, I thought being needed was the same thing as being loved. It isn't. Being needed is a job. Being loved is someone caring about you when there's nothing in it for them. I finally set that weight down. I haven't picked it back up since.